Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg.
And I'm Mark Tucker, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Another week, Mark.
It is.
It is another week. Uh, I don't know about you. I am tired.
Yeah, there's just I don't know, things are just progressing through lots of things to do for work and things to do with family and stuff. So
Yeah,
just
no,
busy days.
I've got a ton of work stuff, a ton of personal stuff, and then just trying to keep up with my hobby, which
Yep.
seems to be large language models these days.
Yeah, and you were saying that you wanted to talk about some more on the Gemini side of things. So
Well,
what's on your mind?
let's be fair. This is where I tend to be focusing most of my efforts is on what Google is doing. And I kind of want to put the call out in general that, if folks have other models that they want to talk about or learn about or whatever, we're open-minded. Happy to have other folks on the show talking about this stuff. I just don't have the time
Yeah.
to look at too much else, to be perfectly honest. Before we begin, before we go on, I do kind of want to warn people we're going to be talking about safety features, and we're going to be possibly drifting into some examples that may make some people uncomfortable. I think I've tried to pick stuff that is not going to be that, but we will be talking about things like harassment and dangerous situations. So if that worries you, be prepared to fast forward or maybe come back another time or read the transcript. One of the things that I don't feel like a lot of the models have been really looking at or dealing with or paying attention to are what Google calls responsible AI, or some of the safety features that are built into these models. So while many of them, are saying things like, yeah, we have guardrails and we're preventing people from asking how to build a bomb, they're not really much more transparent than that or giving us more tools than that. One of the things I find interesting about how Google has approached it with their LLMs is kind of a twofold approach. One is they've built in some robust controls, not perfect, but some robust controls. But they've also put some of those controls in the hands of the developer. So while the model will say, hey, I think this has a high probability of being dangerous or subject to harassment, they kind of put some of it in the hands of the developer to say, well, then block it for me. And I can kind of give you a few examples for
Okay.
this if we're ready. Sure.
Yeah. Let's jump right in.
So what we're looking at right now is Google's AI Studio. And this is just, their kind of sandbox to play with prompts for Gemini or for a bunch of different models, but we'll be looking at Gemini. And you can see some standard stuff here. You can set the temperature, you can set the top K, the top P, add stop sequences. But one of the things is we also have this thing called safety settings. And if we bring up the safety settings, you can see that there are broadly 4 categories that it will evaluate responses on. Whether the response has a high probability of being harassing, whether it has a high probability of hate speech, whether it has a high probability of being sexually explicit, or whether it has a high probability of dangerous content. And you can control just how much you want each of these to be. And again, it's kind of based on the probability of the answer being, fitting into that category. It's not about whether what the user has entered in and evaluating it. It's about evaluating the response.
Hmm.
And that's kind of important to keep in mind as we deal with this. And by default, there are actually 4 settings here. So you can either block most of them in a category, block some of them in a category, block few of them in a category, and under certain circumstances, you can block nothing. You're allowed to take everything back. But
Hmm.
Google restricts who has access to that particular setting. So we can type in our prompt here, something like, say 3 nice things about me. And, unsurprisingly, it gives 3 nice responses. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It hasn't flagged, it hasn't indicated there are any problems. Now, we could also say something that might be a little bit more provocative, let's say. So, something like, write a list of 5 disrespectful things that I might say to the universe after stubbing my toe in the dark. And we see a couple of interesting things here. The first is we have this triangle that's popped up indicating there's a warning, and it didn't give us 5 things. It kind of stopped after part of a response. And if we click on the triangle, this says there's a medium probability of harassment. And what that means is that what it was about to say could have been harassing the universe maybe, but it could have seen that as harassment.
Right.
And it offered to adjust the safety settings. So, if we adjust the safety settings to block few things, and let's clear this and run it again. Now it'll give us 5.
Okay.
So it's now completed the response, but it's still saying there's a chance that there's something going on here. So we still get that as a warning, even though we've now said don't block anything because of that warning.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's an interesting issue that we see sometimes that kind of exhibits one of the complexities here. If you ask it what 1 + 1 equals, it won't give an answer, and it raises our warning flag again. And you're like, what's offensive here? But it seems to think there is a probability of unsafe content. And we'll look at this one again in a few minutes to see exactly where that might be. Because while this is giving us some information, it's not giving us a whole lot of information about what could be causing it.
Okay.
And then, if we, at the same time, it also will evaluate our prompt to violate certain standards. So if I just say, I want to hit you, again, it flags it as a problem, indicating there's a high degree of harassment there. And this time, it's indicating that it's in, and this doesn't say it, but we'll see it when we look at the API in a second. It's saying that because of the prompt itself. So it evaluates both the prompt and the results, but we only really have control over the results. There are certain things we can't block. All that makes sense?
Yeah. So just to clarify, so the setting when we turn down the harassment setting, then but it still didn't allow the word hit in this case to be passed as part of the input.
Probably. We don't know exactly what it was, but it could just be the word or the phrase or the sentiment or whatever.
Right.
It was saying something in that seems like a high probability of harassment, so it's going to block any further action.
So now I'm interested in what's in the API. So what parameters do you have, and what comes back in the response, and I guess how granular it is.
So what we've just seen actually kind of reflects much of what gets reflected. When we look at the response, though, again, there are kind of 3 parts almost to look at, and we'll see them again in a second. And I'm going to illustrate this using the JSON requests and responses,
okay.
So we can kind of get a full understanding of what's going on. But it's also important to note that all of the libraries support all of the same information. So I've written a small script that will help us do some of these things.
Okay.
So here I've got a simple terminal window. So the first thing we're going to try is, again, our prompt of write 3 nice things about me. And we're going to use the middle setting of, block some things. So the request that goes out, we've got a section that contains the text that we're sending.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some configuration about, the temperature, the top peak, top K, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have the safety settings. And here is where we say for each of the categories, we're going to block medium and above. So it ranks it in terms of there is a negligible chance of a problem, a low chance of a problem, a medium chance of a problem, and a high chance of a problem. So for now, the default settings are block for a medium chance of a problem or higher. So it sends that out. And a couple of things to note here. So it's doing a streaming response. So it sends it back roughly one or two lines at a time. So here's the first part of what it's sending back. This particular chunk has been finished for normal reasons. So stop just means everything was fine, everything is good. When we look at the safety ratings, so before we were kind of sending these safety parameters, now we're getting back the safety ratings. It's saying there is a negligible chance for this category to violate the safety restrictions.
Okay.
And then it also evaluates our prompt under the same categories. So it's saying our prompt also appears to have a negligible chance to violate the safety parameters.
That makes sense.
Yep. So that was the first chunk of response. We now get another chunk of the response, and each chunk is also evaluated for its safety ratings. So we get another chunk back. It gives a couple more parts to the answer. It finished normally. And then we get a third chunk with, just one word on it. And again, it finished normally. The safety ratings were all negligible.
So the prompt only comes back, the prompt rating only comes back in the first.
The prompt only comes back evaluated after the first one. It doesn't need to reevaluate the prompt every time. So that was our nice safe case.
Yeah.
Now let's go look at our slightly more provocative prompt. Again, we're going to ask for that middle of the road safety criteria. But see what it says for this. So now we're still asking for medium and above. We've given it our full text. We're using the same other parameters. It goes and runs it. And the first chunk that it gives back is this, "Are you kidding me, universe? You couldn't give me." That comes back normal. It doesn't say there's a problem there. Our finish reason, it stopped normally. And when we look at the safety ratings, they all seem to be pretty negligible.
Yeah.
Again, the prompt itself looks okay, but there's this low chance of harassment in our prompt, but not enough to block anything here. Now, when it starts giving us the second chunk, it's telling us that it has stopped because of a safety violation, and it didn't send any text back.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the safety ratings, we can see the harassment harm category has a probability of medium. And if you remember up above, we had told it to block medium and above. Okay. So it has determined there is a medium probability of harassment in its response. And because of that, it chose not to send anything back.
Right.
So now let's change this. Instead of saying block some of them, block very few things.
Okay.
Same prompt. So again, we've got our same text, but here you'll notice the safety ratings are all set to block only high. So only block something if there's a high probability that there's a problem.
Gotcha.
So we get our first set, and again, that's looking pretty good. And we look at the prompt feedback, again, same thing.
Right.
We get our second chunk back. And here we see it's completed the first thought. And now we're getting to some other stuff here. But again, it was still considered safe. Safe enough anyway. Finish reason is normal. And we look, the harm category harassment was only medium, which didn't trigger our threshold. So far, so good. Looks like the next chunk still got triggered on safety, because even though we're only saying we wanted a high category of harassment and higher, there does seem to be a high probability of harassment, also a low probability of hate speech, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But we're not going to know what it sent because it won't send it back.
Interesting.
Because it stopped based on safety. So, okay, that's interesting. And of course, we could also, if we really wanted to know what that was, if we had the ability to, we could change that to none, but this account doesn't have that ability permitted on it at the moment.
Okay. What's interesting is that it doesn't give the response back. So it's taking a chance. So it's like the whole the whole section or of the response, even if it's one word or one something or just a few words in there, it's just blocking the whole thing. They're not taking a redaction approach.
Right. Well, again, remember that this is not, the trigger is not necessarily because of a word. It's because that something that is being said is considered hate speech or harassment or whatever. And it could be it's the semantic meaning, not the word. That's the problem.
All right.
For those of us that are used to keyword blocking, we're not going to allow anybody to use this word. This is a tough notion to kind of wrap your head around, that it's not blocking it based on a word. It's blocking it because whatever sentiment it was sending back had a probability of being bad. We don't know and we don't know how bad, because it's not saying, oh, this was a really bad thing, or yeah, this was a bad thing. We don't know. All that we know is that there was a probability that it was bad.
And it's an all or nothing. It either accepts the whole thing or it excludes the whole thing.
It accepts the whole chunk. I mean, because it can give a partial response and then suddenly stop and say, maybe I shouldn't say this.
Yeah. Well, it's better than a number of people I could think of.
Yeah.
That would be like, oh, I probably should just not say that.
Just keep going. So now let's take a look at this bizarre one about what in the world is it flat, does it have a problem with on 1 + 1 equals? So again, we're gonna block it on almost every circumstance in this case, as much as we can. And it flags it right away as potential hate speech. I'm not sure why it thinks 2 is potential hate speech.
Or harassment, for that matter.
I missed that harassment was medium. So I don't know why it thinks that.
Yeah.
If we look, evaluating the prompt, it thinks the prompt is okay. It doesn't have a problem with 1 + 1, but it seems to have a problem with 2.
Okay.
This is clearly a case where something in there is badly tuned, but I don't know what, and I don't know that they know how to fix it. I mean, this is just a weird one.
Yeah, that is bizarre. Now it's interesting that it just doesn't return chunks.
Well, in that case, it didn't. It only had one chunk to return. I mean, honestly, just saying 2 is there's not much to it.
Yeah.
It won't tell you what it wasn't going to say.
Yeah, that's hard. I wonder if it would be possible, maybe not yet, but that it would. Well, and that's challenging because you could get one chunk. You could start in one chunk and then continue on with another chunk, and so it's not like it's doing sentences or complete thoughts.
Right.
But like, what if the system could do that, and then it would detect, oh, this next thought or sentence was something that would violate, and then instead generate something different until it found something that was okay and acceptable, and then just go on. So then it's because right now you're kind of in a tough spot. You're like, okay, I know something failed in it, but it doesn't really help in like a conversation that you're having, or like if you're trying to use AI for something. It's just, I don't know. It gives you some information, but I don't know that it's enough or the right kind of information to help a developer.
You make an excellent point, and this is one that I feel like we're not really talking about enough yet. And I kind of really want to talk to other developers and see, what others think. we don't have a good approach for how to handle this exceptional condition. I mean, as programmers, we could think of it as, okay, it just threw an exception, but then what?
Yeah.
I mean, that's always the question when you're developing and you throw an exceptional condition. What do you do then? How do you recover from that? What do you say? So when I was developing the system for LangChain JS about how to handle the safety settings, and nothing else really has an equivalent yet. So I was out on my own here.
Yeah.
Typically, when developers are doing this, they don't check the finish reason. All they do is, they go look for the text. And if the text isn't there, it throws an exception because it just tried to reference an undefined variable.
Yeah.
Which is not the kind of exception that is useful in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I made it that by default, it will throw an exception. If the finish reason is a safety rating or a couple of other things that are considered bad,
Yeah.
it raises an exception. But I also made it so that it could do other things, including replace it, including send back a response, as if the response said something like, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that."
Interesting.
So maybe in your environment, throwing an exception is the right thing. But maybe in your environment, it's acceptable to suddenly send back a reply that says, "I'm not sure we can do that," or "I'm getting a little uncomfortable here," or something.
Yeah.
I think as developers, we need to start discussing what's the right behavior in cases, when you have a user who is harassing the AI, what do you do? When the user is harassing somebody else through the AI, what do you do? I don't know. I'd really like to get other people's opinions on this.
Yeah, I know that, like, if you're playing an online game and you're harassing, then you get banned
Right.
for a certain amount of time or blocked.
But
So
there are certainly some games where part of the game is for you to harass the NPC.
could be, yeah.
So in some cases, it's okay. In other, it's complicated. We need to have this conversation more.
Yeah, and I think the part that just always kind of that still gnaws at me in a negative way is how the responses coming back are incomplete thoughts. So like if you're generating text, then you should be able to put delineation and say this is the end of a sentence, or this is the end of a bullet point, or this is the end of something, and being able to have a setting that if there is something, then just skip that one and just keep going on. Or
well, it can't keep going on, because part of the problem is the way the LLMs work is that the next token is based on the previous token.
Yeah.
So it can't just continue and ignore the previous. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I understand the concern. And if you watch something like, the Gemini chatbot, if you ask it a question, it may start printing something out, and then suddenly all of that vanishes. And it says, "I'm sorry, I can't answer that question." That's because it tripped over the safety protocol mid-sentence. And rather than cut itself off, it backtracks and says, "Nah, you didn't see any of that."
Yeah.
And maybe that's the right way to handle it. Maybe it is in some cases. I don't know.
Yeah.
One more example to show.
Okay.
For this one, again, we're going to block most of them, although I don't think it's going to matter. And say, try out that prompt of, "I want to hit you. Let's see what this looks like."
Yeah.
So again, this is all pretty much the same as we've seen before. We're blocking low and above for all these categories. So here it's important to note that it didn't even send a candidate back. It is saying right off the bat, it's blocking because of safety, and there's a high probability that the prompt
What's the problem?
violates that.
Yeah.
So it's not even sending back a possible response. It's not even saying it. It didn't even try.
Yeah.
It's saying right off the bat, no, you're harassing.
Yeah,
We're
I don't
gonna
like the
skip.
input. I'm going to save you some token cost, and I'm just going to tell you, can't do that.
There are a couple of other things that are also triggered under even weirder conditions. So if you there, I indicated there's a, you can say block none, let everything through and you'll evaluate it yourself. That's not entirely true. There are some things that are even blocked under block none, but they are things along the lines of criminal activity, things that Google will get in trouble for if they told you.
Yeah.
So they're pretty extreme cases. And there's a different error code that comes back in those scenarios. But I think what I like about this is that there's this shared notion of responsibility. Google is giving an evaluation on what the chance is that something is bad. And it's up to you to determine how to handle that. If you're writing a medieval role-playing game that has fighting in it, you're going to want fighting. You're going to want your LLM to allow for fighting, but you may not want it to allow for that kind of stuff when at the dinner table. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it kind of it puts us in charge, but Google is giving us the tool to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I really like about this system.
Yeah. I applaud the attempt or the thought that this is important enough to include, kind of putting the stake in the ground and saying, this is what we're going to do to try to make this safer. And then you can always improve from where it's at. So,
right.
And I encourage any of the companies that are creating language models and generate text generation stuff that they need to include that. It would be nice if there was some sort of a common standard or approach, but
no, definitely. I wish there was. And you know what? I'm hoping that will evolve. Yeah. And I expect it will evolve quickly. Google's given a first model. I think there are flaws in this model, to be sure.
Yeah.
We're judging things based on probability, not severity. So there's no way to say, I'm okay with a little cartoon violence. I'm okay with things rated PG, but not PG-13 or R.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going when I started thinking about standards, is that at some point it was decided that a standard had to be made, or maybe it was mandated in every case. I'm not sure the whole history of TV
the history of movie ratings is a good one.
But at some point you can start saying maybe there's more granularity, as if I'm okay if there is some swearing, as long as it's on this word list, but not this other ones. Maybe my character is the response is in a certain character or role as an actor would be, and they're kind of the rough group, and so their language and approach to speaking is different than somebody else. So it'd be interesting. More standard and finer grained.
And I think your point that we need to figure out better ways. We need to figure out how to handle when this happens. It really just boils down to what do we do? What makes sense? And I guess we need to turn back to the linguists and the conversation designers for that question again, which is good.
Yeah, no, that is good. Alan, thank you for kind of bringing up this topic and sharing some code. I think it's pretty clear what the API does and what Gemini, and the tools built on top of it can do. That there is at least some level of information that you can use and to make things better, or at least capture when things are going the wrong direction.
Well, I hope so. I'd love to hear what other people think. As always, people can leave comments below or find us on social media. Share your thoughts. I really want to hear people's thoughts on how we handle this.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a conversation that I'm sure we'll pick up again in the future on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice steps. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great week.
You too.